Desi, thank you for taking the time to talk to me today and the people who will be participating in our digital transformation program. You're an experienced organizational transformation consultant. You've practiced in many industries. Could you describe your background and what you do now for the people who will be watching?
Yeah, I practice a body of knowledge called Lean Six Sigma. A lot of people have heard about it. You can do a web search on it. And Lean Six Sigma is a systematic body of knowledge dedicated to the improvement of processes. So, just a quick definition of process. A process is basically any set of activities that you use to, transform a set of inputs into outputs. So, baking a pie is a process. Doing your accounts receivable in an accounting department is a process, and building a wall is a process. So, as process improvement people, we take Lean Six Sigma principles and concepts and break down activities into processes so that we can analyze them and hopefully improve them. So that's what I've been doing for the last 25 years, and it's still fun, so I keep doing it.
And that's a good thing, especially that it's still fun. So you're practicing Lean Six Sigma, but you're also involved in organizations that are pursuing digital transformation. So, what does digital transformation mean to you, and why do you think it's important today?
Yeah, digital transformation, we can break that term up into digital and transformation. So, transformation, like any transformation, like a process transformation or any kind of transformation, is taking something from its current state to its future state. With the basic understanding that we think the future state is somehow better than that current state. So that takes care of the word transformation. When we use the word digital, at least in 2021, 2022, digital just refers to the informational side of processes. So what we're saying by digital transformation is transforming the informational component or the flow of information within a process. Because information and material actually flow together. So, as an example, if you're driving a car, of course, you're moving your car from one point to another point, maybe through a set of roadways and highways. So that's the process piece, that's the material moving, but you have to make decisions based on, your speed and the maps that you're looking at, and so that's the informational side. Information can be in the form of analog or paper or physical things, or as we try to do today, we try to move things into an electronic or virtual sort of environment for the advantages that they offer. So put that together, a digital transformation is basically taking the physicality of information and making it digital or virtual. That's basically what a digital transformation is all about.
Very clear. And as you practice Lean Six Sigma and you focus on the introduction of lean operations, uh, how does that impact what you do with digital transformation? How should digital transformation be applied in an organization that is using a lean model? And how might you see that as being different from a more traditional approach?
Well, a company that's applied lean principles, they've already structured, designed, and improved their processes to look in a particular way. So when they go through a digital transformation, they start to interact with vendors. They could be companies that are offering specialized information systems or information robots. There's a variety of technologies out there. Sometimes they might work with these companies and be expected to sort of transform their processes into how those technologies work. So if you've applied lean process management to your company, you'll take a stronger stand for how your business model and how your process works, and you'll make sure to customize technology to fit your processes. Whereas if you haven't taken a hard look at your processes, if you haven't applied, lean principles, you tend to adapt your process to the technologies that are being presented to you, which is not necessarily a good thing. And that's where lean companies or companies that have been exposed to lean manufacturing have a bit of a head start because they have a handle on how their processes are. They understand why their processes are good or why they're not good. And so they're looking to leverage technologies to make their processes better rather than a traditional company that hasn't applied lean. They're looking to transform their processes to support their technologies. And then in that particular situation, you get a mixed bag of results.
So what you seem to be saying is that having consistency and appropriateness of what you do with the technology, with the processes that the organization uses, is very important. You seem to be saying with that if there isn't that consistency, then you would end up with a number of different changes in the organization that may or may not complement each other, and in some cases may conflict with each other. Is that a correct understanding of what you're saying?
Yeah, absolutely. A good sort of a visual way to understand that is, let's say your objective is to put this nail into a piece of wood, right? So you want to hammer a nail into a piece of wood. So that's the process. The process is to get the nail into the wood. There's a bunch of different ways you can do that. You can use a hammer, or you can use some sort of automated piece of equipment to do it and get it done very quickly. Now, if you're just finishing your basement or putting in a room in your basement, a hammer is sufficient to get the job done. If you work for a builder and you're building 100 different houses, a hammer might be too slow. You may need something more automated to get the same job done. So if you have no sense of the process and the frequency of what you're doing, you might just pick up an automated system to do that and use it once or twice. And that's a wrong decision, right? So that's where understanding your process allows you to select the tool. But at the end of the day, it's still the same thing. The process is you're trying to get the hammer into the piece of wood, but you're going to select a different technology based on, based on context.
Wonderful. And so you've been involved in a number of digital transformation projects. Could you provide some examples of projects that you might have been involved in and the performance impact that they had?
Yeah, I'll give an example. So recently we finished a project with an engineering company. Basically, they design and manufacture molds for the injection molding industry. So there's a heavy engineering upfront component to it, and of course, there's expensive equipment that are required to actually make the molds. So now they would try to spend a lot of time in the engineering side of things to make sure that no mistakes happen in production. But at the same time, the more time that they spend in engineering, the more engineering labor is associated with that project, and their margins go down. So they need to really spend the right amount of time in engineering to ensure that production occurs properly without any errors, and they're not over engineering or under engineering any particular project. So we help them select the right engineering tools, the engineering design software tools, to ensure that they could engineer their products with reliability, with ease of use, as well as confidence that whatever engineering ideas that they had would come to fruition. And so that reduced the amount of engineering time, but improved the amount of quality and reduced the amount of defects and errors that are happening in production. So that's an example where a digital transformation in terms of software selection really made an improvement to the overall company.
Wonderful. And that improvement, as you described, both reduced cost and improved quality, which, if I'm not mistaken, would be consistent with a lean approach to the application of technology.
Absolutely. In fact, though we were invited into that project to select a piece of software, we put that aside. And the first thing we did is to capture, document, to understand their processes, where the defects were happening, and then work our way backwards to what technology would support an improvement in those particular processes. And when you map out the process and talk to people, then you start to see, oh, I get it. The weak point is between engineering and production. That's where that weak point is coming. These are the root causes that are making that happen, and then you can select software that actually works. And yeah, that's a great example where we improve the lives of engineers in particular, to make the company more efficient.
Wonderful. And so what do you see as the main challenges that organizations face in their digital transformation, and how might they address those? Do you think sometimes the challenges that organizations face in digital transformation are maybe sometimes underestimated?
Yeah, I would say the biggest challenge is marketing. I mean, one of the things I've said in the past is marketing is the last standing religion. So it's difficult for customers. When you're in a particular industry, you're part of a company, you're running a company. That's your expertise. You're not necessarily a process expert or a technology expert. You're an expert in your particular domain. And many suppliers will come to you and say, hey, this is the best solution, that's the best solution. And everybody, including myself, knows how to use the words of the day to sell you on things. So I find, even for myself, the biggest challenge is to get past the salesperson, the brochures, and the marketing, and to get to the core of what value that particular technology provides, and is that value useful for my company at this time. I find that challenging. I feel every supplier these days talks very similar, whether you're selling an accounting software or consulting. We seem to market ourselves like we're all changing the world. Well, I looked outside this morning and the world looked the same as yesterday. So I think that marketing layer is one of the most difficult challenges. And that's why I encourage most people, whether you use an external company or not, to really take a deep look at your own processes, to say, like, how does product actually flow? How does value flow from my suppliers through my organization to my customers? And you don't need to take a course in Lean Six Sigma to do that. I always encourage people to just try it out in their own particular ways and see what it looks like. You'll get a lot of value from that.
So understanding the use of the technology as being consistent with your own processes, and making your selection based on that rather than on the marketing messages that you might hear is, I think, very good advice. And
Yes, absolutely.
okay, so for those who are involved in the operational activities of their organization, whether as an engineer or as a manager of operations, what do you see as their concerns about digitally based change? And what do you think organizations should do to overcome those?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So what happens is when a company goes through a digital transformation, of course, we're looking at different processes, different databases, different, silos and buckets of information. But there's a certain, it sometimes gets overlooked. There's the interface where these technologies actually sort of interface with the operator, with the engineer, with the production worker, with the operations manager. And there isn't a perfect term for that, but I call that the digital ergonomics. So digital ergonomics are, if you're an engineer, are you using a CAD system? Do you use a mouse? Do you have one monitor or two monitors? So there's a digital interface by which you work, and if you go through a digital transformation, you're going to see that interface change. Maybe you're an operations manager and you're used to scheduling production with a schedule board that looks like a whiteboard with cards and whiteboard markers. That's a very typical situation in a manufacturing company. And now you go through a digital transformation. You might be doing a very similar activity, but it might happen on your computer. It might happen on a screen somewhere. So though it's the same activity, because the interface has changed quite a bit, it changes your psychology and comfort with it. So what I always suggest is to put those tools out where they're meant to be used, and also spend some time in an iterative way to kind of change what they look and feel like. Some people like to, do everything on their laptop. Some people like to do things in the open on a bigger screen. So allow some time and budget to customize how that digital interface looks like for people, so that they can, whatever they were doing really effectively and comfortably before, they can do just as well, if not better, in the new digital future state. That's what I would suggest.
So what you are emphasizing there is the need for the technology to be suited to the individual and their needs and concerns to be taken into account as part of the technology. I guess the whole process of selecting the technology itself, and then in the way that you introduce that, that you're taking these concerns into account.
100%. Probably one of the most common examples is implementing like a field service solution where you're giving some technology or software to someone who's always out in the field, like in Canada and in the 4 seasons that we have. And imagine you have someone on a construction site and they need to enter information in the system, and they got a smartphone and they got gloves on and a hat, and they're trying to punch things into their tiny screen on their smartphone. So it may work from a PowerPoint, from a sort of perspective, but in where the work is getting done, that's not a good interface for that particular individual who's either in his car or on a site. He's not in a heated or enclosed workspace in his office or anything like that, right? So that's an example where you got to design that interface that works for that person. We're all human beings at the end of the day. So
yeah, and I assume that particularly in an industrial environment, this is especially important. It's important in an office environment, certainly, not important there. But in an industrial environment, you have particular conditions that you'll have to deal with on a regular basis.
absolutely, absolutely, and also not force everyone. If someone is later on in their years, they've gotten really proficient with a set of perhaps older technologies. Sometimes you just gotta, weigh the factors. Do I want to force everyone to go this technology and lose the interest of someone that's that talented, or do I want to make some exceptions as well, right? Uh, People think digital is a good thing. Digital isn't a good or bad thing. It's just a tool that makes certain things more efficient sometimes. And even efficiency is not necessarily a good thing. I used to live in a house a few years ago where I had a communal mailbox, and that mailbox was a 15-minute walk. And I used to drive home from work, park my car, and then walk 15 minutes in my mailbox. And someone once told me, "Why don't you just pick up the mail en route, and then you wouldn't have to do that walk?" And I said, "Well, I like the walk. I like to see all the kids and pet all the dogs and talk to my neighbors. I like that 15 minutes there and 15 minutes back." So that's an example where I want that part of my day to be not so efficient because it makes life better for me. So there's a sort of a notion that making things efficient is a good thing. I think efficiency and effectiveness need to be handled and controlled and tweaked to make life better for everyone and everyone in the company, rather than applying a sort of morality to it, like it's good or bad. And this is someone that's coming from an efficiency background, so
But what you're describing is the need to effectively combine the technology with the human aspects, and of course, if you do that, that's going to be much more successful.
yeah, there's nothing more efficient than happy people. So
Absolutely. So, talking about those people and considering particularly engineers,
yeah.
how do you see their role being impacted by digital transformation? Does it change the contribution they make to the organization? And if it does, what should they be doing to prepare for that?
Yeah, so I'm an engineer by background, a mechanical engineer as well. So typically as an engineer, we think in terms of, specifications and standards and designs. So we're using a lot of information, a lot of important technical information. And most of the times we're thinking about the value of that information. So for example, I might be preparing a layout drawing for a warehouse. So in my mind, as an engineer, what's important is the actual layout. But as we move into a digital era, as we evolve in a digital era, not only do we need to think about the actual layout, but also the format that the layout is in. So is it on a piece of paper? Is it on plotter size paper? Is it in AutoCAD? What's the file format? So in addition to the information that we're thinking about producing and working with, we have to think about the format that it's presented in, because formatting information also has an impact on how it gets transmitted and received. So If I produce information on paper, it can get received and transmitted in one way, but if it's in a digital form, it can be received and transmitted in a different way. So my recommendation for any engineers starting or working through their career is to understand the tools that they're currently using, but also understand the digital counterparts to those same tools. So if you're a CAD designer that works on paper, start to get familiar with the digital tools that complement that. That would be my recommendation, is just to get familiar with the digital tools that are complementing your existing work, because you know, like it or not, they're going to come into your career at some point anyway. So it's good to get familiar with them.
So so the advice you're providing is that engineers should think first about the technology that is especially relevant to the role that they have today, and learn more about it.
Absolutely, and you don't have to be an expert in every single technology, but if you understand their basic functions and how they work in your particular industry, I call that awareness level knowledge. That awareness level knowledge goes a long way. And then depending on where you work and what you do, you may get deeper into a particular technology. But having a framework of what those technologies are, it's important. Understand spreadsheets, databases, different kinds of input tools that engineers typically use. These are the things to become aware of.
And digital change and shop floor employees, people in non-managerial roles or non-professional roles in the organization. Can you talk about the impact that digital change has on them, and what organizations should be thinking about to manage that effectively?
Yeah, so what happens on the shop floor, digital transformation can have a positive and a negative impact for those on the floor. One of the things it does is a digital tool that gets introduced to them could be very, very different than the tools that they're used to. So if you're a person that has a lot of muscle memory around using your hands and building things, and suddenly you're required to use a digital tool, a piece of software that has a lot of bells and whistles that you're not used to using, it kind of slows you down. And what I see happens to people is when they get slowed down, they feel professionally compromised. They feel that the quality and the efficiency of their work has gone down. And depending on who you are, you may want to, they may communicate it, or what happens more often is they hide that particular aspect because they see it as a weakness. So what we typically do in digital transformations is really give people the opportunity to, and I use the word failure in a particular way, but give everyone on the shop floor an opportunity to fail. So when we introduce the technology onto the floor, we don't tell them, hey, this is how this works, learn how to use this. We tell them, listen, this technology does not work well. We need your user input to make it work better. So that puts them in charge. It gives them the feeling that they're contributing to the system, and they actually, believe it or not, it gives them really fantastic advice. You know, make this button bigger. This should be in the top right, not in the middle. They give you fantastic advice, right? Lots of things about the user interface. So I wouldn't make the people on the floor a problem, but I would use them as an opportunity to improve the ergonomic interface of the solution, really. And because those production staff, they're really the strength of the company, right?
Absolutely. I know that you're committed to improving the environment. That's an important part
It is.
of your life. So how do you think digital transformation can contribute to that?
Well, digital transformation allows, number one, information to flow through so many different people without having material to flow. So you don't have to send a letter on a guy on horseback to another city. You can send them an email. You can send them a text. So this kind of digital movement of information just puts less cars on the road. Simply, that's number one, right? So there's a lot of work. There's a lot of savings to the environment from just moving of material around. So that's one big benefit. And of course, I'm hoping that we're not printing off the things that we see in our screen, and there's less use of paper and less use of paper products in the course of a digital transformation. One thing people may not know is as we start to move towards digital solutions, many of those solutions are hosted in servers around the world, right? We call them cloud service. And so the number of servers that are being built and hosted around the world is increasing. Those servers consume electricity, they create heat, they need to be cooled down. So as we move towards the digital world, it is important to recognize the impact of, you know, hundreds of thousands, if not millions of servers that are, we call them server farms that are growing around the world, and the impact that they have on the environment. And there is an opportunity to, to make that that technology more environmentally friendly as well. So, yeah, I'm always looking for ways to see how we can be kinder to the earth, I suppose.
As we should. So I just have one final question,
Sure.
and it's a catch-all question, if you like. It's any further advice that you'd like to give engineers on successful digital transformation?
Yeah, I would definitely tell any engineer. I mean, I'm going to say as an engineer, if you're an engineer, you're already smart. That's the one thing I know about engineers. So if you're smart, you know that really work gets done through a process, and no matter what anyone tells you, and it doesn't matter which company or supplier or marketing brand tells you, first understand the process. How does this get done? Once you understand how this gets done, it's already going to point to the technologies that you need to use. And if you start with the technologies first, without a firm grasp of how the work gets done, then what happens is you just fall into the same bucket as everybody else. And as my father used to tell me when I was young, if you see everybody going to the left, you better go to the right because they're probably all wrong. So, forget the common message, and engineers can do this better than others. Use your brain. If it doesn't make logical sense, if you can't deduce it from first principles, if someone tells you you're over your head, then that's the wrong answer. There are a few things in life that are pretty difficult to understand. Quantum physics might be one of them, but everything else in this world is subject to the laws of mathematics, and physics to the laws of physics. So if you're an engineer and you can't understand it, something's wrong with it. So I would advise engineers to remember their training, which is based on logic and systematic thinking, and begin with the process, understand deeply how things get done, and then select technologies if they're required to add to that process. That would be my number one advice.
Which I think is really great advice, because I see way too often people looking at technology, feeling an urgency to
Yeah.
adopt new technologies, but not fully understanding their impact, and making bad decisions as a result of that, but feeling compelled to make those decisions because they feel if they don't, they'll be left behind, or they will be damaged in some way. And I think your advice that people should take the time to understand things properly, and not make decisions that they do not fully understand the consequences of, is I think extremely important advice today. And so a great note to end on. Thank you for doing this, Desi. I really appreciate it, and I know it will be valuable to the people who watch it.
Peter, it was my pleasure, and I'm always happy to work with the university folks, and especially with engineers.